What is better than a video closet montage?
When I first met Nadia, I felt like I had a lot to learn from her. She had another taste for life. She was amazing and incredible, young and beautiful.
When someone strives for perfection, sometimes that aspiration can work against you.
Nadia believed she had made a contact with a soulmate.
Hey, paparazzi. I am. It's great to you.
The internet can be an awful place. It exposes a lot of people's worst and perverse thoughts.
She was a very determined person, so she set her mind to something, she was going to do it for sure.
This is Commander Neil Nelson for State Law. I'm hoping you can help us with some information.
It's just unfathomable that somebody would prey on somebody at their weakest moment.
And then they disappeared. You don't know what happened to them.
My name is Pascal Jensen. In 2007-2008, I was studying contemporary dance at the School of Dance in Ottawa. It's not a huge city, but great for students. I first got introduced to Nadia through my friend Chia. Sent me a message saying, hey, there's a girl that I think you should meet. She had long brown hair, beautiful eyes, a really nice smile. I remember thinking she was very pretty. We met at a cafe. It was one of my first dates ever with a girl, and I think hers as well, so we were both very nervous. We still didn't know how to approach it. But once we started talking, the conversation just started flowing and flowing and flowing, and before we knew it, it was 6 or 7 hours later, and we actually got kicked out because they were closing. She was someone that I wanted to spend more time with. I liked being around her a lot.
Nadia was my younger sister of about 11 years. I was a bit older and was able to be silly or go to the mall or go to play laser tag. She had lots of friends in the neighborhood, had a paper route at a young age. She was very inquisitive, very smart for her age. When Nadia decided to go to university, she picked one that was 500 kilometers away. Close enough to drive, but not close enough for a surprise visit from the parents, I think was probably her theory. She wanted to be a lawyer. You could tell the way that she would engage in conversations that she was a bit of a smart mouth at times. Her parents, my dad and her mom, would have preferred for her to be a little closer. But after 17 years of a very close-knit family, you want to spread your wings and explore and find yourself and meet new friends.
Nadia and I began seeing each other, and we were both very excited. We were also still coming out. It was very thoughtful. She would think to get me a guest pass so that I could go to the cafeteria in the morning with her and her roommates. We hung out in her dorm room. She gave me a tarot card reading. We listened to music. She did read some of her poetry to me. It was beautiful and intricate. It was about life and the way she saw it. She had a sticker on her bulletin board that said, "Don't forget to love your life."
She definitely had a good couple months of figuring out what university life is like without your parents around. I would see on Facebook, some pictures of her. She definitely was enjoying a bit of the party life. She had a video diary under alias that she had uploaded to YouTube.
What is better than a video closet montage?
One day she's doing a little fashion show type, showing off wardrobe stuff. If you work a lot and you play a lot, sometimes that aspiration can work against you. It was an endless pursuit of perfection. Need to be the best. Have to get the best grades. She took on a lot. Workloads were heavy. If you have aspirations to be a lawyer, there's, I think, minimal room for error.
One night I was supposed to go meet her after my rehearsals. We had a date planned, but she wasn't answering her phone, and she wasn't answering the door. She didn't show up or didn't message me or tell me. I heard from her about 2 or 3 days later, apologizing, saying that she just wasn't feeling well and that she was going to go home for Christmas break. Sort of take a break from everything because she was feeling overwhelmed, and if she was feeling better back in January, then we could reconnect again. That was the first sign that I got that things weren't all right, that life was not all bright and shiny.
When Nadia returned for Christmas, she wasn't the same bubbly, outgoing, fun, wanting to be around people.
It's snowing outside. That's why I did this in front of the window. I hoped you'd be able to see the snow. Because personally, I like looking at the snow.
There was a significant difference in her mood. She was very closed off, hours and hours and hours on end in her room, not wanting to really socialize with, even her mom or dad the way that she used to.
I can stay in school. I can't even go to class. I'm gonna lose this semester. And it seems like it would be easy, just start going to class and doing your work. But I can't.
In the new year, we did talk a little bit via Messenger. She didn't seem to want to meet up. It was just, now she's back, and she's back at school, and she's busy, and I was very busy as well with dance school. So our relationship slowly fizzled out. Late February, my friend Shia, the same one that introduced us, told me about a party that was happening at a frat house. That Nadia was coming and I was going to see her. It was the typical university party. We were drinking out of red plastic cups, like in the movies, And I remember we had a great time. It was the Nadia that I knew before. She seemed happy. We had a connection once again. And it was exciting. We were sitting next to each other, talking. And at one point, she got up. And I thought she was going to the washroom. And she left. We couldn't find her and we couldn't get a hold of her. I didn't know why she didn't tell me or she didn't say I'm leaving. I was worried more than anything.
I remember getting a text message from my dad late at night. I remember reading it and being like, hold on, what? And then I hold on, I brush my eyes and, turn on the light and hold on, what's this say? It was like, Nadia's been missing for 3 days. And my initial reaction is like, what do you mean she hasn't been seen in 3 days? Where is she then? One of her roommates said between 11:20 and 11:30, she heard her door close. She found it odd. The next morning, it's locked and there's music playing. They then had a security guard open the door because it's locked from the inside. Wallet there with money left in, cell phone there. Everything else looks as if they're coming back in 5 minutes. That night, she also updated her Facebook status to, Nadia will someday be loved. I drove to Ottawa, going the speed limit of 4 or 5 hours. Pretty sure I did it in about 3.5. I figured driving out there, if a cop pulls me over, I think I probably have a really good excuse to be speeding. Your mind just races as to the worst case scenarios of what could have happened. Did she run away? Well, how can she run away? Her wallet is in her room with no money. She has no credit card. Well, was she kidnapped? If she's kidnapped, maybe she's still alive. Well, okay, let's hope that she's been kidnapped. There's a million other scenarios, but none of them are positive. But I remember walking into her room. Literally everything was there, except her ice skates, her jacket, and her ID. You're going skating by yourself? Okay, that doesn't make sense. It's 50 centimeters snowing. You leave your room locked, but music blaring. Everything is there in your wallet except your ID.
I first heard that Nadia was missing while I was sleeping in my bed at home, and my father woke me up and said that the police are on the phone and they want to talk to you. And I talked to the officer, and he asked me if I knew where Nadia Kajuji was. They said that she had been missing and no one had heard from her. And I asked if they had spoken to her parents, and they said her parents are in the room with me right now. And that's when I knew something was wrong. I figured it must have been a misunderstanding until I went downstairs. I turned on the TV, and they said at this time we are looking for 18-year-old Nadia Kajuji on the news, and I just lost it that she was actually missing. I broke down. Put my boots on because I knew I was going to be going through snow, and I took a bus down to Carleton. I just went and looked for her, and there's a big field across the way, and there's a river that runs by the bridge, and called out her name and thought she might be hiding somewhere. 100% I felt she was still alive. Nadia's father was very involved in the search. He was so worried. He was a mess.
Believe me, I have hope. I have very much hope, and I pray to God. My hopes are just limited. I can only hope for so much.
It was all over the news. There were flyers being handed out and put up looking for her. Everyone was looking for Nadia Kajuji.
My dad would be handing out flyers, hundreds, missing posters, 18 hours a day in an Ottawa winter. If you know anything about Ottawa winters, they are not forgiving winters. -20 is not uncommon.
I would pick up all the newspapers, and I collected every article, and I had this collage on my wall by my bed. Just every single article was taped up about what was going on.
When Nadia went missing, the Ottawa police wanted to find some clues as to where she may be. Her parents were worried. Her roommates were worried.
The night she went missing, she had an appointment the next day with a guidance counselor. This actually came out in one of her diary videos. She was openly talking about how she had a conversation with her counselor and how she was going to harm herself.
Have you been thinking about suicide? I'd say yes. I'm depressed. I have clinical depression and insomnia. What a shocker. Maybe I wouldn't be thinking about it if I could sleep and be happy. No, you're unwilling to give me medication to make me sleep.
Police did have access to her computer, and they decided to see what information might be available on it to give them any clues as to what might have happened to Nadia. Nadia Kajuji became involved with someone online using the name Cami. Nadia believed she had made a contact with a soulmate. Cami had shared with Nadia how life had been hard for her and how she really needed to end her life. Cami was a female nurse and knew a lot about the best ways to kill yourself. Cami had found somebody who she could relate with, someone that she thought would be open to actually going through with a suicide pact. All they needed was the strength of each other to go through with it. Cammie was willing to share information because she was a nurse, the best ways to kill yourself, how to hang yourself. Nadia was saying, well, I have this other plan. She wanted to stage it as a skating accident.
The police were doing searches in the frozen river. But sadly, I think there comes a time where search parties are just a way to feel like you're doing something. It's like, what are you searching for? Where can I direct my pain? Where can I direct my energy?
The Ottawa police knew that they had an individual, a Cammie, going by the name of Falcon Girl. They traced the IP address back to a residence in Rice County, Minnesota. They had made contact with the residents, and he had told them that must have been his daughter, but that she was fine and that there's nothing further to be worried about.
The police get a phone call that a kayaker has spotted a body on the riverbank. A water-swelled, bruised body washed up on a muddy, thawed riverbank is like, to know that that's how she was found, just awful. Being the intelligent planner that she is, she figures, all right, let me slap on some skates. I'll jump through on the water, and the ice will be so thick and frozen after I get swept under that if I don't die of shock of hypothermia, I'll definitely drown.
I was in rehearsal for a musical that I was in, and I had left to go downtown to meet up with a bunch of friends, and then my best friend Katie called me, and she said they found her. And I couldn't believe it. I broke down crying. I fell to the ground. I was so mad at her. I was so mad at her for not reaching out to me, for doing what she did. This person that was so wonderful and smart, I couldn't believe that she was gone.
My name is Sergeant William Francis Heiner. My responsibility with the St. Paul Police Department was to investigate child exploitation via the internet. On the 25th of March 2008, I received unsolicited information from the UK via email. It was quite unusual to be contacted by anyone from another country. The initial information was very basic, describing the online predator who was using chat rooms to deceive and manipulate persons and to commit suicide. I first heard from Celia Blake in late March of 2008. Celia made a very unusual detective.
Celia Blay was described to me as just a little old lady living in the countryside that I think had a real passion for trying to protect people.
Celia had explained to me that because she had suffered from depression in her past, she was interested in helping others who were having those same problems. And while in the chat room, she would speak to young people who were suffering depression and try to lift their spirits. Celia Blay came across an internet site called alt.suicide.holiday. She believed that something was happening online that she felt needed to be stopped. This teenager had told her she had engaged in a conversation with some person named Lee Dow and had arranged a suicide pact with Lee Dow. According to Celia, Lee Dow was a mid-20s female living in Minnesota and possibly an emergency room nurse. Lee Dow would also go by the name of Cammy or Falcon Girl.
The first time that I ever heard about Celia Blay and her investigation into the suicide chat rooms was whilst I was looking for new leads. The suicide pacts that Lee Dow was making with people was that she would watch them online, killing themselves. This intrigued me as a journalist, and I knew it was a story that I wanted to follow up. Celia put out a series of warnings on the internet chat rooms. Several people came forward to her to say that they'd been contacted by Lee Dow. A lady called Kat Lowe was at a really vulnerable stage in her life. She was a mum of 2. She just really hit rock bottom and she started to use suicide chat rooms. The next thing she knew, she was talking with this person going by the name of Lee Dow, then getting warnings from Celia Blay, warning her that Lee Dow was dangerous, that she was targeting vulnerable people and luring them into making suicide pacts. Kat said that every time she turned on her computer that Lee Dow was there. Lee Dow was just persistent. She knew she had to do something to stop this woman. It couldn't carry on anymore. So that's when she and Celia began to talk about doing a sting operation, exposing Lee Dow. Kat and Celia decided that they would record conversations that Kat was having with Lee Dow, and they wanted to find a photograph of her. They felt that this was a very serious crime. Kat Lowe decided to take the correspondence that she had with Lee Dow out of the suicide chat room. It was personal communications between the two of them to gain up more trust. In one discussion that Kat Lowe had with Lee Dow, they both decided to put their cameras on so that they could see one another. That was when she was able to take a photograph and see for the first time that Lee Dow wasn't a she, it was actually a he.
Nadia's funeral was, it was a difficult day. In a typical Ontario spring. Birds are chirping, flowers and daffodils are coming up. But then it doesn't hit you until, like, you pull up to, like, a tombstone and, like, a pile of dirt, and you're like, well, maybe the day isn't as lovely as the weather is appearing.
My father drove me to Brampton, to Toronto, to go to the funeral. People were walking hand in hand. There were cheers. There were just so many people that knew and loved her, and she touched a lot of people's lives. My father was with me during the ceremony. He sat with me, and when they read her poetry, he turned to me and whispered, he said, she must have been one smart kid. Went and I met her mother, and she said, oh, thank God, and she hugged me so hard. And she said, when my daughter talked about you, that was the last time I saw her happy.
Celia Blay told me that she had spoken to a person called Elaine Drybrow in June of 2008. Elaine Drybrow had told her that her son had committed suicide after speaking on the internet with Lee Dow. Mark Drybrow was a 32-year-old who has suffered with mental illness for many, many years. At the time of Mark's death, she and her daughter had discovered emails on Mark's computer. Lee Dow would explain that she was an emergency room nurse, and she had understanding of suicide methods, what works, what doesn't. She would give instructions on specifically how to commit suicide by hanging. The instructions were very detailed as to what type of rope to use, what type of knot to use. Minnesota has a law against aiding suicide. And in that law in 2008, it simply stated that anyone who advises, encourages, or assists someone to take their own life would be guilty of a felony. This is the coroner's report we received from Coventry, England, that indicates the wounds that suffered by Mark Drybrow during his suicide. This is a very important document for our investigation. I noted the coroner had given a description of the ligature mark that was found on Mark Drybrow's neck. A ligature mark that was high on the neck, raising towards the left and to the back of the neck. Now, in my opinion, that description fit exactly the description Lee Dow had given to Mark Drybrow on how to place the rope for his suicide. Our information was Lee Dow was still active in the chat rooms, and we understood that there was a risk that more people would be contacted by Lee Dow. Something needed to be done. Celia Blay gave to me several email accounts that she believed belonged to Lee Dow. I was able to trace the location by using the email addresses given to me by Celia. All of the information led back to the same name, William Melcher Dingle. This is a map of the location that we traced the IP address to the home of William Melcher Dingle. It's a small town in southern Minnesota, Faribault, Minnesota, about an hour's drive south of the Minneapolis-St. Paul area.
As Bill and Hyder and I discussed the information we got from Coventry, England, and then the follow-up information from Ottawa, we discussed whether we had enough information that reached that level of probable cause to say a crime has been committed and this is the person that's committed it. And unfortunately, there was actually 2 nurses in that house in Faribault, and it was a husband and wife, and they both were nurses.
So we not only had to determine who was at the keyboard and who committed that crime, but we also had to get their story.
With those hurdles of not having evidentiary quality material, Bill and I decided that we would just go and knock and talk.
It's as simple as it sounds. We knock on the door, and we hope to get a statement. We hope to get Mr. Melcher Dingle's story. January 9th, 2009, Neil Nelson and I drove down to Faribault. It's about an hour south on Interstate 35. It was a bitterly cold January night. Our strategy at that point was very simple. To hopefully, number one, identify who actually was Lee Dow, and secondly, to give that person an opportunity to voluntarily tell us their side of the story.
This is Commander Neil Nelson from St. Paul. I'm hoping you can help us with some information. I'll pull up the chair right here if you don't mind.
Mr. Melcher Dingle, to me, was very average. You could call him unremarkable. He certainly was not an imposing figure.
Keep on light, are you okay? Oh, this will work. Commander and myself work for the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force. Because of that job, we have some expertise on Internet-related issues. What do you mean? What can you tell me?
See, my wife and I are in the healthcare field, and we've talked to people that have and had issues with depression, suicide, and so forth.
Okay, well, first off, my first question is this a discussion your wife should be in on with us?
No. She has nothing to do with it.
He said nobody else in the house was engaged in this activity, so our focus turned exclusively to Mr. William Melker Dinkle.
You're the one that's been on the internet. Well, can you walk me through what you're talking about?
Basically, if a okay, it starts like this. So-and-so goes online and they say they're looking for a method. And then I've just discussed with some people about why do you want to do this, or what's going on with your life, stuff like that.
His role as a caring nurse, and that he would go in there, and if people had questions about suicide, he would try to discourage it, but he was also there to answer their questions because he had knowledge as a nurse.
And then I haven't come out and said who I am, like a 46-year-old male. I've used an anonymous name, and because people don't know exactly who you are and where you're from.
Can you give me an example?
Selfie girl or who else.
So do you consider yourself talking them out of suicide?
A lot of times, yeah. All the time, what can you do? There's not much you can do.
There was some disconnect as to what he believed he was doing and the reality of what he was doing.
Did you explain to them how to hang themselves? You seem to be having trouble answering my question straight up. So as a nurse, how did you feel about advising a stranger on the internet about methods on committing suicide? Explain that to me. You talked about...
Well, when people would come online and they would say, well, they've tried this and this before, and they boxed it up and ended up, in a hospital, mental health units, and they were always looking for more effective ways.
Who were helping decide whether they live or die.
Yeah.
As he was pushed on more details regarding suicide pacts and teaching people how to hang themselves, he came around to saying that his interest in suicide chat rooms had turned from an advocacy role into something more sinister.
Can you give me a number of how many people you believe you were an accessory to suicide?
Honestly, no.
Was that part of the suicide pact that you would make people with people? I'll watch you, you can watch me?
Yes and no.
So you had a suicide pact with this woman in Ottawa. She did it, you did not.
Obviously, yeah.
That sounds incredibly manipulative.
He admitted to suicide pacts where he would be willing to kill himself at the same time. He admitted to trying to get people to hang themselves via webcam so he could watch it. He admitted to being fascinated with strangulation deaths.
There was no doubt by his story and by his admission that he had an obsession with the act of hanging. His wife, who is also a nurse, was present in the house, and she was in another room of the house at the time of our conversation. At the end of our interview with him, we brought her into the room so that her husband, Bill, could tell her why we were there and to tell her the activities that he was engaged in on the internet. She was shocked, she was upset, and I felt for her. It looked like it was a horrible moment for the family. Neil and I both knew that we had gotten the information we were looking for. We understood that William Melcher Dinkle was Lee Dow, was Cammie D, and he told us the truth and told us his involvement in the suicides of Mark Drybrow and Nadia Kajoji. We got our hands on Mr. Melcher Dinkle's computer because he gave us consent to take it out of his house. We found pictures of people hanging, and we also found some conversations between him and other people about suicide by hanging. We located an email sent to him by the Canadian suicide victim, Nadia Kajuji.
Obviously, your son, Mr. Melker Dinkle, had influenced people into killing themselves. There's a bit of a shock to your system that you've heard something so bizarre and so beyond comprehension.
Evidence from the Ottawa Police Department in the Canadian suicide. We had forensic computer evidence from the UK on the suicide of Mark Drybrow. We had forensic evidence that we pulled from the computer of Melcher Dinkle himself.
It was clear that Mr. Melcher Dinkle was not going to change his ways, but authorities in Ottawa and the UK did not feel they had a very strong case or the appropriate statutes to bring any charges against Mr. Melcher Dinkle, and kind of threw it back to me after reviewing all of the facts and the investigations from the multiple jurisdictions. I did charge him with aiding and abetting suicide of Mark Drybrow and Nadia Kajuji.
I'd like to talk to you about Nadia Kajuji, the young woman you encouraged to kill herself, which she did.
Okay.
Can you tell me why you did that, sir?
No comment.
It was a game, and that's what he was looking for, is that end game of, can I get them to kill themselves and let me watch?
Do you have any comments, sir? Nope.
One of the more cold things I heard him say was, it was the thrill of the chase that he enjoyed. Not that he cared whether they lived or died, just to see if he could get them to that point. They were vulnerable, and he knew it. Rather than reaching out and trying to help them, he was reaching out and trying to push them over the edge. That, I think, was as cold as you can get.
It's just unfathomable that somebody would prey on somebody at their weakest moments. I mean, they kick them when they're down. Not only kick them when they're down, but encourage them to die.
Finding out that this William Melcher Dinkle, who was a nurse, would encourage people for his own pleasure and then still go to work at a hospital was like sickening.
To have somebody sitting there in Faribault, Minnesota, talking to somebody in Coventry, England, or Ottawa, Canada, and saying, kill yourself, is beyond anything I had ever seen in all my years in law enforcement.
Melcher Dinkle and his defense attorney challenged the constitutionality of the Minnesota state statute prohibiting assisting suicide. And they took it to an appeals court and eventually to the Minnesota Supreme Court.
Do you think you should serve him?
The legal challenge was that the state statute was unconstitutional. It infringed on the First Amendment right of free speech.
Melcher Dinkle's lawyer maintains his client's behavior was unsavory but not illegal, and that his words were protected by free speech.
His defense attorney was honest about it. He goes, most people might find it reprehensible, his conduct. But he was equally adamant it was legal free speech, that he had a right to espouse, to advise, to encourage people to kill themselves. And if they want to listen to him, that's not his problem.
You have people that were predisposed to commit suicide. You had conversations back and forth between them. Those conversations are protected.
However, the trial judge decided he was guilty for assisting the suicide of Mark Drybrow, and he was guilty of attempting to assist the suicide of Nadia Kajuji.
In court today, Judge Thomas Neville sentenced him to less than the 15-year maximum because he said the ex-nurse was the sole reason his victims died.
Melcher Dinkle was sentenced to 6 months in jail and 10 years of probation.
One of the things we noticed about William Melcher Dinkle is his initials or WMD. And just like a weapon of mass destruction, he didn't care who his victim was.
I have gone through depression and anxiety. I've been in dark places. I know what it's like to not know where to reach out to. And the fact that Nadia reached out and was looking for help, and she was met with encouragement to end her life as opposed to help, is mind-boggling. Had Nadia lived, she would have changed the world. She would have fought for injustices. She would have changed laws and policies, and she would have fought for people that couldn't. She would have done amazing things.
Why is her story so important? I think her cascading last legacy, sadly, will be that she took her own life with her world in front of her, which is maybe why I've felt more responsibility to make people hear the importance of suicide prevention. I don't know what pushed her over. There's only one person that knows the answer. And you know, she's hanging out with Babe Ruth and Alexander Hamilton up in heaven.
I think that when you're in a state of depression, you look for anything to hang on to relate to. I felt like I should have reached out more. If only we had stayed connected, would it have been different?